right, so let's call to order the PPC meeting for May 27th, 2021. And so I have some boilerplate here to read off. And it says, welcome. Due to the virtual format of today's meeting, I'd like to start off by providing some guidelines. We have participants attending by computer and others who may be attending by phone. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If you have technical difficulties, try joining the meeting using a different device such as a smartphone or tablet, or use the call-in information in the meeting invite to call into the meeting. Overview for tonight is tonight's meeting will be discussing the Issaquah Municipal Code Title 18 Land Use Code updates, including the draft schedule, outreach plan, and scope. This topic is for discussion and not informational as noted in the agenda. And now for attendance, Kristen, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
And commissioners, please unmute and say here when your name is called.
Commissioner Bader? Here. Commissioner Lewis? Commissioner Milligan?
Here.
Commissioner Monahan?
Here.
Commissioner Boyce?
Here.
Commissioner Zaragoza?
Here.
Commission Chair Fall?
Here.
Right. Lewis is not present.
She's here.
And a moment
See,
later.
there she is. I didn't hear you say here, and I didn't see you. Excuse me.
Finding out. I'm sorry.
Change of
My
role.
apologies, everyone.
Commissioner Lewis is here. All are present.
We can't write her off yet. Okay, now for the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the May 13th, 2021 minutes provided in the agenda packet? Okay, hearing none, the minutes are approved. Now on for regular business. Let's see, so IMC Title 18 Land Use Code, the draft schedule, outreach plan, and scope will be presented by Minnie Dhaliwal, our Community Planning and Development Director, and Planning Consultant Katie Coate are here to present the schedule, outreach plan, and scope for Title 18 Land Use Code update. Commissioners, if you have any questions or comments, please indicate so in the chat by typing question or comment. All right, and Minnie, would you like to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Fall, and good evening, commissioners and members of the community. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for just a second, and hopefully this thing works. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So tonight we're here to share some of the history, but also what's coming in front of the commission, the community, and ultimately the city council for the final decision on the big project Title 18 code update. So we thought we would take the opportunity to just give you a little bit of, what exactly is Title 18, what does it do, what's the framework for looking at some of this. So we wanted to use this opportunity to just kind of cover some of the very basic information about what is land use code. As you probably all know, it's a range of development regulations, but at the end of it, at the crux of it is, it regulates how the land is divided, how it's used, how it's developed. It is done through a variety of different chapters, and things like zoning. Every single piece of the property has a zoning associated with it. Then it establishes, which needs to be consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. But at the end of it, it establishes what the development standards are for that. There's a subdivision chapter, there's some critical areas code, which talks about wetlands, water courses and such. There's the landscaping pieces. There's the design guidelines that regulates the aesthetics and the form of built environment. such as height, parking. It also includes procedural requirements in terms of how do we engage with the public, how do we notify them, what is involved with decision making, who makes the final decision of some of these land use decisions. So that's sort of the crux of what a land use code entails. The city's Title 18 code, which is the land use code, was initially adopted in 1996. It's been modified annually. And one of the things that the city council and the community desires to fix is, because it's become a patchwork of ordinances, that it needs to be easy to use and still comply with the vision that the community has adopted. So a little bit of history that I think the city's worked on updating some of this code on an annual basis, but at some point it was decided to take a comprehensive look at it and really look at the big picture and do a more comprehensive sort of redo of the land use code. And so that work started somewhat in 2019, went off and on, and then the Land Use Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee was formed. And it's currently comprises of Councilmember Goodman, Walsh, and Hunt. And the council tasked the committee with identifying the stakeholders and recommending a project scope, a public engagement plan, and make the recommendations. So I'll talk briefly about the work that the committee has done and charged the Planning Policy Commission with going through and making a recommendation for full council. Most recently, in April, the City Council also awarded a professional services contract for this code update. A significant portion of this will be handled by BHC consultants and Katie from BHC is over here tonight. She'll talk to you about the schedule and other things, and their consultant team, which is made up of multiple consultants based on the specialty that we need to look at through the code. I'll talk and hand over to Katie, but I want to cover some of the basics of framework for land use planning. So Growth Management Act was adopted in 1990, and that sets the framework for a lot of these regulations that come into play. And overlaid with that is the Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050. So Puget Sound Regional Council looks at the forecasting, how the region will grow, how many people are expected, what's entailed for housing, jobs, and so on and so forth. And that forms the basis for multi-county planning policies, not just King County, but the other counties. Then King County takes some of that framework and works and comes up with countywide planning policies that the cities then have an opportunity to comment. They also need to be ratified by 70% of the population of the King County, and that establishes the framework for local cities to come up with their own local, unique, comprehensive plans. But they have to be consistent with all these layers of underlying rules and framework. And then at the city level, then our local land use regulations have to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. And those are approved. Our local rules, land use regulations are approved by Department of Commerce. We have to notify them. And one of the things they look for are whether we are consistent with all of these other framework. So growth management planning, I included this information in your packet, but I want to highlight some of the things that form the planning in Washington State, which is different and unique in the sense is that we establish a framework for encouraging urban growth where facilities can meet the service needs. There's a guiding principle to reduce the sprawl. Transportation needs to be efficient and multimodal. Affordable housing is a guiding principle. Economic development is also there. Protecting private property rights from arbitrary decisions is also a guiding principle. So therefore, the land use regulations cannot be so broad and so that they are not applied consistently. The permits, there's guidance on how they need to be issued in a timely and administered them fairly. and so on. Citizen participation is a goal, historic preservation, Shoreline Management Act. A goal was added to the GMA, which is the Growth Management Act, most recently. So in addition to the Growth Management Act and the guiding principles, there are other state laws. State Environmental Policy Act, the acronym is SEPA. We'll try not to use these acronyms, but this may come up. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. So this is really looking at environmental impacts from development. So 1971, when a lot of cities did not have any regulations in place for protecting some of the natural resources and such, SEPA was used as a mitigation measure for a lot of these things. Over the years, it's used as a tool where you really have a big project and it's going to be a big impact. It needs to be looked at. Those impacts need to be assessed early in the project. Shoreline Management Act is another state law. In Issaquah, it's the Lake Sammamish, the main stem of Issaquah Creek, and such. So there are some water bodies that have to also be, the regulations around those have to be consistent with the Shoreline Management Act. Back in the day, state decided that subdividing the land is a regulation of state interest. So if you have any land and you want to divide it into smaller lots, or for sale, for lease, or for financial purposes, it has to be consistent and compliant with the subdivision laws. Critical areas, wetlands, watercourses, there are 5 different types that are regulated by the state, and the cities have to update our regulations periodically to keep up with the best available science, which is the guidance we have to document. So that's some highlights of the state laws. There's a lot more, but these are some of the main ones. In addition to the state planning framework, we have cities' own adopted visions, goals, and policies. So these come in various forms, and you all probably have your fingerprints on some of these, if you were on the Planning Policy Commission when these were adopted and you made a recommendation to City Council. Others may have participated through your community engagement. There was significant community engagement with the strategic plan, which is the most recent update that the city did in 2019. So all of these are out there. You are probably all familiar with them. We're happy to have more, discussion. But the land use tools and regulations are tools to implement some of these visions that the city has adopted. There is some upcoming work that the city is doing for a climate action plan, and I believe that's tentatively scheduled to come in front of you later this summer or fall. And so in addition to these policies that were adopted formally, the Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee has charged staff and the Planning Policy Commission with these 13 goals and their desired outcomes. So we've included these in your packet tonight. But if you really want to focus your reading, I would suggest you go to these 13 and get familiar with what these desired goals and outcomes are for the council and the community. So again, I think in the document itself, we reference the land use policy from the comprehensive plan and also from the strategic plan, which informs some of these goals. For instance, protect the forested hillsides or provide adequate parking while using land efficiently. Protect your critical areas, conserve and protect, but also enhance the wetlands and the riparian corridors. Improve the public awareness is one of the goals. Increase the housing diversity, tree canopy coverage, retain the charm and distinctive character for some of the neighborhoods, create a livable community, have some sustainable development and climate goals. How do we manage effectively the travel from new development? Implement the park strategic plan and the green necklace plan that was done. Sign code that's being processed separately that you all have made recommendation on. And the third one captures, modernize your code and incorporate the best practices. We currently have too many different codes in too many different places. So how do we create it more user-friendly interface? How do we incorporate the best practices in that? So that's the goals and outcomes chart. I'll briefly touch on the strategic plan. There are some broad goals here. Growth and development is one of them categories, and I just picked one, the first one, in terms of the retain the neighborhood character, which then formed into the goals and outcomes chart. The potential action under that is to update codes and standards, which is what we're doing now, bringing forth some recommendations for you to consider. Comprehensive plan, which is a state requirement each city is required to have. There are some required elements that we have to have, and there's one that's for land use. So that establishes some of the goals and policies for land use. I picked one, the very first one, I think, that talks about what's a goal and what's a policy. The goal would talk about at a little bit higher level, maintain and enhance the natural systems. The policy would say encourage efficient use of land by allowing clustering of buildings within the development. So you're preserving some of those natural features. And then we have the Central Issaquah Plan, which has gone through vetting with the community. It's been adopted, amended a few times, and it establishes some of the vision for different areas within Central Issaquah. Again, these are at a little bit level of talking about livable, sustainable, compact, connected urban community. Pedestrians are a priority, mix of uses. And where people are drawn from different places to live, work, and play in these areas. But then all of that sets the framework, and then we come to what does the Title 18 do? So all these visions that the city has adopted can be implemented in basically 3 different ways, and title and land use regulations are a pretty important component. The other ways these things come into play and get implemented are a capital improvement plan that you guys all participated in that recently. Where does the city choose to spend the money and fund those facilities? And the third thing is the programs and implementation of things that the city does. So it's sort of like a 3-legged stool, but development regulations play a pretty strong and important role in bringing forth some of those desired outcomes that the community has for Issaquah. So how we choose to do a Title 18, yes, it has to be compliant with the state laws and framework, but then the community, the council, the planning policy commission gets to choose how we set up our zoning ordinances. What kind of processes do we want? What does sustainability mean for Issaquah, and how far do we want to go in some of those regulations? So an example I want to give you here, so that's sort of the framework, but what does this mean on the ground? So if Central Issaquah, for instance, has some parking goals to say, provide safe, reasonable, adequate storage of cars. So what does that mean for Title 18? Does it mean you can have a path that connects the parking to this? Do we want a different surface? Do we want it any kind of parking garage to be screened? How do we want our sidewalks to be set up? So it gets into the nuances and details of what that those regulations mean. Similarly, for circulation, for instance, the vision is not just for moving cars, make pedestrians a priority. The rules and regulations will then get into how wide the sidewalk needs to be. Does it need to have different surfaces? How far apart the trees need to be planted? So those are the level of details that the land use regulations and the Title 18 will get into. So just wanted to kind of share so you understand from an implementation standpoint, how these are implemented. So someone proposes a site plan and here's what they want to build. Then you look at, then the staff will be looking at the Title 18 code to make sure that it is in compliance with the code. Are the parking lots broken up? Are the stall sizes meeting our standards? How much landscaping there is, quantitatively, qualitatively, What's the massing of this building looking like? That's the level of detail that the land use code then gets into. For planning, it looks at the layout, it looks at the lot sizes, how wide the roads need to be, how the homes are going to be set up. For the site plan, you're looking at, are there community spaces that are included in there and things of that nature. The land use process is also what you'll be making a recommendation on, how to engage the community in it, but also how to make sure that it is in compliance with all the state law. So right now we have all of these, the pre-application meetings, we have some site plan approvals, staff makes a report. Generally, larger projects would go to development commission. Which ones should go to planning commission, development commission, which ones should be administrative, which ones should go to hearing examiner. All of that will be vetted out through this Title 18 update. And then, when we issue a decision, what happens after that is anyone can appeal it. If it doesn't get appealed, then it could be a construction permit. Then we do inspections, and then they're issued a certificate of occupancy. At that point, it becomes where it can be occupied. So that sort of gives you a very quick and, from point A to point Z, what's the framework, what's Title 18 code, how is it implemented? We're happy to go into more detail with that, but I want to make sure we have enough time today to talk about how we're going to handle the update and what the schedule looks like, and get your feedback on that. So that concludes my presentation. I can take questions now, or we can have Katie give her presentation and then get into questions.
Thank you, Minnie. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up for questions from the commissioners. And I'll give you folks a minute to put something in the chat.
Chair Fall, I see that Commissioner Lewis has a point of clarification.
Okay.
Commissioner Joy Lewis, thank you for that presentation, Minnie. You did email us in our packet asking for 3 things for us to consider, which I, of course, have my recommendations right now. But I'm curious if right now you're taking input on goals. Right now, this is the first time we've seen this document, or if right now you're saying that the goals that have been presented are set, not ready to be, they are what they are. That's what I'm kind of curious about.
Yeah, those are the goals that the city council has established. So that will inform your review so that was work that was done before with city council.
With
So
that committee,
yeah.
yes, I'm curious
Yeah.
if they're looking for feedback on those goals, and if they'd like, I see missing things from our experience working with community, and so that's what my question is. If that committee is looking for feedback on the goals.
I think at this point, the idea was that the goals were established, but we're happy to take the feedback. And we do meet with Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee every 2 weeks, and we can share if you feel strongly that there are some missing pieces there.
I do. I have like 5 or 6 things that are missing, and so I can email you separately if that's not something you want to discuss in this forum. That's fine, but just let me know what your preference is for that.
Yeah, that's fine. You can email us.
Commissioner Milligan has a question. Oops.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Lewis. You almost asked my question, but what I'd like at this time, because I think it's really helpful for us and for the public, is if Director Diwali would put into the record what the 3 questions are for tonight. What do you want to hear from us by the end of the evening? It'd be helpful right now to get that on the table.
Sure, I can post it in the chat. But I also, Katie was going to talk about the schedule and then get into the questions, because most of those questions are related to the schedule and how we want to handle this. But I'm happy to put that in the chat.
Okay, it looks like we have another question from Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Commissioner Joy Lewis. One more point of clarification about how you want us to dive into this. Are you wanting to go point by point on the goals and have us do a round robin, on each one? Do you want us to, how is it that you would like to get feedback on this document? I'm sure everybody has a lot of comments on it, so it would help to give us some direction on how you'd like us to dive in right now.
Are you talking about the goals and outcomes chart?
There's a lot to break down, but yeah, I can either go point by point on goals, if you want us to all go through that way, or if you'd rather have us go through page by page. I'm just curious how you want to go through getting our feedback on this document.
It's up to the chair how, I think for me, we can go commissioner by commissioner, or we could go by topic. So I don't know if other commissioners have information about the goals, but I think that's a separate conversation we need to have with Title 18 ad hoc committee. And those are the goals that the council has established. So we're happy to take the feedback on the goals part. But we also want to make sure that we get your take on the pieces for Title 18 and how we break up the pieces to bring forth to you on that piece. So my preference would be to talk about the schedule and the public outreach piece first, if we can, and then if we have time, we want to talk about other missing pieces in the goals. You can either email it to us, or we can discuss them collectively as a group with the commission.
Yeah, I'll email you separately about the missing one. I didn't know if you wanted feedback. I've got multiple feedbacks on the current goals, not talking about anything that's missing right now.
Okay.
So specifically what you were asking about, I'm curious on page 23, if you can help me out with a color code. There's no key. And right now, the way that the colors are used, they repeat. And so there's no discernible way to tell how you guys are actually breaking apart that schedule. So if we could go to that to help us with the schedule.
Yeah, so that's the part that I think Katie from BHC was going to walk you through tonight. So she hasn't done her presentation, so if we can let her talk through that piece first, that may help answer some of the questions.
Thank you very much, Minnie. So I think what we'll do is hold off on questions until after we hear the presentation, and then we will maybe ask the questions by topic. That way they're categorized kind of a compartmentalized way. Okay, so let's go ahead and have Katie give her presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Stop me if you're not seeing what I'm seeing. So thank you all for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I have presented to the Development Commission before, but I've never had the pleasure of meeting this commission. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to skip ahead to the schedule and talk a little bit about our plan. And I recognize there are a lot of numbers and words and colors and lines and bars on this schedule, and it's pretty challenging to fit a 1.5-year process into a single line. So apologies for that up front, but it is one of our priorities after hearing some public feedback about wanting the schedule to be a little bit more user-friendly, especially for members of the public. We are going to be working on a schedule that is a little bit easier to access and more clearly shows when and how members of the community can be involved in the code update. So I'll start with actually the bottom line here. This is showing the 4 phases that we're breaking this code up into. We're just in the very beginning phases here, in the strategy phase and work planning time. We haven't actually started drafting any of the code elements, but we've started to lay out a table of contents for what the code could include. We've also been reviewing draft elements that were created in the last code update effort that started in 2019 that was not finished. And then we're we're diving into a gaps analysis of looking at the guiding visions and policies and strategic planning documents that Minnie introduced, figuring out what the vision is, how the code does or does not implement those visions, where there are gaps, and how we create code to fill those gaps so that the visions can be implemented into code. We're expecting that the drafting phase will last for about a year or so. There's a significant amount of work that needs to be done on many areas of the code, not only creating new sections, but updating sections, combining sections that are in different parts of Issaquah's land use code, and then going through an iterative process of reviewing those drafts and revising them until we feel like they're ready to be called a final draft. And as we have final drafts, we'll begin to bring those back to the Planning Policy Commission. Until skipping way ahead, we have a final draft that's complete sometime around mid next year, and then we'll begin the adoption phase. So stepping back to where we are now, we're meeting with you to kick this process off, and also to figure out the best way that we can engage with the PPC. This is obviously a really important project for the city, and this body is charged with working through the details of the code update and then recommending approval to the council. We wanted to make sure to meet early so that we can work out some of the questions about goals and this gap analysis idea. And then again, we will come back once we have actual draft code to discuss that with you as well. But one of the parts that we are hoping that we can talk about tonight is the idea of bringing the PPC together with other boards to hold joint meetings to address different topic areas where other boards might be able to add additional expertise. For example, there are topics that have to do with the natural environment. And then in this second bar here, you can see the green items are those that have to do with landscape or critical areas or tree management, generally natural areas topics. Those might be good topics to have a joint meeting with the environmental board on, for example. Other topics like the orange and blue topics have to do with building design, site planning, also procedural permitting steps. Those might be good topics to have a joint meeting with the Development Commission on, for example. There could be other topics like the green necklace integration that maybe the Parks Board would want to weigh in on. So we recognize there isn't endless opportunities for meetings, and the PPC probably has, a full plate regardless of the code update. So we may need to make some choices on how we take certain topics and how we plan the schedule to have the right boards in the right room on the right night. So I'm going to advance. This is a zoomed in version of the schedule. I wanted to just highlight again some of the different groupings that might make sense. I hadn't mentioned the Transit Advisory Board is another group that we may choose to take some of the transportation related items to. I've added dates here. I think those are very tentative dates, and all of these dates are up for discussion. But this was one idea of how we might choose to break up those joint meetings. In addition to the joint meetings that are also public meetings where members of the public can come and listen, ask questions, and have public comment, we'll also be engaging in other public outreach, depending on the type of information that we're trying to, the type of guidance that we're trying to get from the community. we've already received several public comments. And so as we get public comments, we're keeping track of those. We'll be logging the comments based on their topic and tracking how we address those comments in the code update. We've also discussed holding some targeted focus groups, perhaps for certain members of the community that have a specific interest that that they're willing to meet with the city on and help us to think through some of this gap analysis conversation and to share their ideas and help us develop the code or develop the ideas for the code before we start the drafting process. We will also be doing targeted outreach to the city council before the draft is ready for them to review. We've been meeting regularly with the ad hoc committee that is guiding the update process as well. Our goal is that the council, that we have a very transparent process where members of the community and members of council are aware of what we're doing, which sections of code we're working on at different times, so that they can make sure and have that opportunity to comment and to have their interests be considered in the work that we're doing. We've discussed possibly using a survey tool if we find that there's information that would be best gathered through a survey. That's an option that's open to us, although we haven't yet identified what information would be useful to gather through a survey, but that is a tool that we might use. And then the city also will have a website where we'll have information on upcoming meetings. When drafts are available, we'll have drafts, links to drafts that the public can access and provide comment and feedback as well. So I actually broke my questions into 4 instead of 3, but I think the general area or the general theme of the questions is the same as what Minnie put in the chat. And essentially what we're hoping to get your guidance on tonight is the schedule that we've proposed the right amount of involvement during this early stage of the code update? Is this the same amount of involvement you'd like to have when a draft is available? Is this the right amount of joint meetings? Are there different groupings of meetings with boards that you'd like to have? Is it, more with the Development Commission, more with the Environmental Board? Would you prefer to have meetings on your own? And then is the way that we've broken up the topics the right way to break them up, or would it be helpful to take any other topics on their own or grouped with other subjects differently than what we have done? So that's the end of my presentation, and I will stop sharing, but I'm happy to bring the schedule back up if that's helpful as a tool for talking.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. So we're going to, I think, open up for public comment, but we're going to have 2 different sets of public comments tonight. We are going to first focus on public comment as related to the Issaquah Municipal Code Title 18 Land Use Code. That way we can hear what the public has, what the public opinion is and questions about Title 18 before we have our discussion, so we can maybe rope things in together. And then we will open it, we'll have our discussion, and then we'll open up back for public comment, maybe for general business and input. So with that said, Kristen, let's go ahead and open up for public comment at 7:11.
Well, this is Kristen. So we have 2 people signed up to speak. The first is Deepa Sivarajan. And so Deepa, I am going to make you a panelist. I'll unmute you. and I'll make you a panelist. You're now a panelist. You can go ahead and speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Oops. Stop my video. Hi, my name is Deepa Sivarajan. I am the Washington Policy Manager at Climate Solutions, which is a nonprofit working to accelerate clean energy solutions in the Northwest to the climate crisis. I wanted to come and comment on the Title 18 process today, just to strongly encourage the city and the Planning Policy Commission in your recommendations to incorporate climate as a consideration and a factor in this land use code update. I know that there are a lot of moving pieces in sort of the city's planning processes, and one is an upcoming climate action plan, but I don't want process to get in the way of action for something that is as urgent as our climate crisis. And I know that Ann Fletcher from PCA Issaquah is on today as well. They held a great event last year, a climate convening, to engage with the public around what the city should do around climate, and there was strong interest from the city in both reducing emissions from transportation and from buildings, both of which I think are factors that can be addressed through land use code as well as through other policy mechanisms. So I just wanted to strongly urge that lens, and also offer to provide any resources through our work. Climate Solutions does a lot of work coordinating between local governments on policy approaches, particularly in decarbonization for both transportation and buildings. I am currently working on a sort of model policy with Earth Justice that uses land use code to get at decarbonization of buildings. So any way that we can help provide resources during this process and make sure that this land use code is comprehensively addressing a whole number of issues of sustainability, not just ones outlined in the goals. So thank you.
Next speaker that we have is Ann Fletcher. And you are now a panelist. Make sure.
Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Ann Fletcher. I'm an Issaquah resident and a People for Climate Action member. And we really appreciate the Community Planning and Development's comprehensive presentation about the Title 18 update. And we've been waiting for this. And the links and the additional documents in the packet were very informative. And the efforts to involve relevant city departments and the public are commendable. So People for Climate Action community members who are concerned about climate change would like to see the city do several things. Number one, ensure that its many policies, plans, and regulations address current climate change issues and work together effectively to inform and support the Title 18 update. Number two, clarify how the comprehensive plan has or will be reviewed for current high-quality climate policies and how that will drive climate-related Title 18 regulatory codes. Number three, review the strategic plan to either include climate goals or at least reference other plans that address climate. Currently, climate is absent from the strategic plan. Number four, develop the climate action plan in conjunction with other plans that affect climate, such as the Mobility Master Plan, the Sustainable Building Action Strategy, the Parks Plan, and etc. And ensure that this climate action plan provides the goals, objectives, measures, etc., that are absent from the strategic plan and which are necessary to guide Title 18 code revisions. And last, we'd like the city to fulfill its commitment to the county city goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030. To continue to strengthen collaboration among the sustainability and other relevant departments. And this will result in a more effective, comprehensive climate plan, which can then be supported by Title 18 code. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I don't have anyone else signed up, but if anyone would like to speak, if you could either press *3 on your phone or indicate that you would like to speak by raising your hand. I see one, but I will give it just a minute to see if we have others. And I think if you're having trouble indicating, you can also send me a message to the host. Thank you. Okay, so we have Connie Marsh. Connie, I am going to make you a panelist right now. Okay, you are a panelist.
Okay, here I am. So I'm Connie Marsh. I live on Squawk, and I actually read the land use code all the time. And so I looked at this presentation and thought, one, the gaps analysis does not indicate that we are looking to see if we actually have the appropriate policies in place to build a code from. So I would suggest that the phrasing for the gaps analysis needs to actually address gaps in our policies, because our land use code is a bit behind. It hasn't, not our code, our land use element in our comprehensive plan is behind. And our strategic plan is a focused document made to only do things for the next 5 years. And so we are missing a large portion of policies that to guide us into the future. And Anne illustrated those in climate action details, but we also need more in habitat. We need more in all sorts of different places. So the problem with that is most of the committees and commissions are not familiar with the policies and what might be missing. So I think what we need to do is have a conversation about what the community wants, right? What is different for that we want in the future? And so then we can understand if what we have in our policies actually matches what the community wants, and that is missing. We are pretending that we know the answer to that question and that our current comprehensive plan actually does it, and our regional guidance gets us where we want to go. But Issaquah is a very narrow local place with specific goals. So I would like to see all of these committees together having those conversations per topic on what is it that all you commissions and the community see for transportation, and what does that actually mean? And for the environment, what does it mean? And that is the beginning of how to get to an implementation that gets us all where we want to go. So then the next thing that I see is missing. Most of this is education. Very few people have gone through years and years of watching the land use code in action. So when you think of the land use code, you'd sort of get a bit of a concept of, okay, there's a process and then stuff gets built, and in theory, stuff should be protected. But how does that actually work? So I think all these commissions need to actually go through a project, or maybe 3 mini projects that have a variety of concerns, so you can get an idea of what you're actually trying to impact, because the code is very narrow. And say, for example, I want to protect a stream, I have to make sure the definition of the stream is something that will cover a water body with fish in it. And in our current situation, we've had a situation where that's not the case, right? And that is how detailed the code needs to be effective. Now, I don't think any of these groups are going to be able to understand all the details, but I think it is super important to understand the flow and how important the language can be, because it can impact a developer. And it would be, this doesn't pencil, so I'm moving elsewhere, to, yeah, I can do it because I can do those things. It's not going to cost me a little, that much money, yet we can get what we want as a community. And that's what we're trying to do, is get that nuance. But I am afraid of putting this information out in front of a council who frankly is not that much more educated in the code than all of the commission members, and then ask for your opinions with so little education. So I think you need at least 2 big meetings just on education so that everybody can make much better decisions and make decisions in context. And I could, of course, I have opinions on all of the details, and I will agree with everyone. I didn't understand the schedule. It didn't make sense in its flow as I picture it in my brain. But hopefully, I'm not saying you guys don't know what you're doing, right? I'm just saying it's super complicated, and it's hard to understand how you can even comment when you don't have enough information on board. You should be able to open your mouth, right? So that's the place that I'm coming from on all of this. So I hope that the city will reconsider and back up and do a little more of an education program in advance. Thank you.
I do not have anyone else who has raised their hand to speak, but I'll ask one more time. If there's anyone who'd like to speak, please raise your hand or press *3. Is there anyone else? I don't see anyone else.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Thank you for all those who have spoke. We will be coming back for general public comment after PPC's discussion here, and that will be for general business. Moving forward, we're going to close public comment at 7:24, and we will open this back up for PPC discussion and questions, Q&A. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in chat. And Jason has a question.
Thank you, Chair Fowl. This is Commissioner Voice. So just so I'm clear on tonight's goals, is apparently we're just here to work through the mechanics of the schedule and what it is that's expected from us. It doesn't sound like we're here to debate content, which is a shame, or adjust content. It's basically, we're just being set up to be the timer and day calendar for this process moving forward. Is that correct?
So not necessarily. I mean, we will do the mechanics of when things are going to be scheduled and all that. We just wanted your input in terms of how much, involvement, to just get a feedback. This is the first time the community's seen how we want to structure this over the next year and a half. So this is the initial feedback that we're looking for at a high level, not necessarily on this date, on this day time frame or anything like that, but more for, are you okay with the concept of doing joint meetings with the other policy boards and the 5 groupings that we've come up with? Do you think that's manageable for you? Because it's going to involve a fair amount of reading, fair amount of understanding the issues, or not. So really at that level is what we're hoping to get your initial buy-in by, or direction that, no, this is not going to work, and, go figure it out.
So since I'm still on mute, thank you, Director Dhaliwal, I'll just to continue. So I don't think it's nearly enough. There is a lot to learn. And again, this is a very brief summary, and I understand we need to start putting stuff on the board as far as dates and times and schedules. But there's a lot of education that has to happen. This is a big lift that's going to affect everybody from residents to developers. Everybody will be touched by this. And again, I'm hoping that we'll be able to put in a lot of our own comments about the 13 goals and other things. So I'm thinking there needs to be a lot more runway for this to be successful. I think 5 meetings and joint meetings are wonderful, but to try and have the meetings at the same time that our decisions are being made, there's going to be a lot of crosstalk, a lot of commissions and committees seeing things differently, need time to digest that, need time to refocus, but trying to have us not only do all of that work with joint committees and commissions and then make decisions is setting up everybody for failure. There's a lot here. And I appreciate the part that we want to take it piecemeal, and I think that's the right approach. But this needs to be a long runway. And I don't even know if the time frame right now, we're trying to get this to adoption by, I think it was fall of 2022, June of 2022, so a year. I don't know if that's enough, especially with all the other things on our plate. That's very few touches. So, first comment.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Commissioner
Lewis.
Jason. Oh. So we have, before we go to a question from Nina, I just want to reiterate the 3 questions that Minnie gave us, and there are 5 major groupings and subgroupings appropriate to bring to PPC's review should they be rearranged. The second question is, should PPC meetings on each of the groups be held jointly with other boards? The current schedule shows 1 meeting per group. Is it possible for PPC to get briefed from staff, hear the public, and then deliberate at the same night? I think we know what that question is. And then Katie's questions was, is the right amount of involvement with PPC in the code analysis stage? Does PPC want less, more, or the same amount of engagement when the draft code is available? Are there certain areas of the code where PPC desires greater level of involvement? Are there additional joint hearings PPC would like beyond those identified in the proposed schedule? Does PPC support the proposed topic groupings as a helpful way to divide parts of the code into manageable subgroups? That's a lot of questions there. Thank you, Jason. You actually took a lot of the words right out of my mouth, so good job. Okay, question from Nina.
Excuse me, Commissioner Lewis had a question before Commissioner Milligan.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Lewis, sorry.
No problem. Commissioner Joy Lewis here. I love following Nina because she makes my work easy because I usually go, what she said. But I will go first this time. I'm going to take the floor for a minute because I do have a couple questions, and I'm going to address each one of Minnie's 3 questions so I can hear from my fellow commissioners. I had a question earlier that didn't get answered, and that was about the color code right now. We're using a dark green, a slightly lighter green, and then orange and blue. It was told that dark green is natural areas, and then orange and blue is building design. So what I would tell you first is the way this is broken down, let's use a couple more colors might help, and a key that says, hey, this is what this color means. It's not making a lot of sense to me the way it's broken down. So when you ask for feedback about the public being able to view it, I can't view it, right? I saw this and went, why are these choices being made? Right off the bat, it's kind of a turnoff. So I don't know if we have a key or if we have the ability to change the way this is laid out, but it's not pleasing to the eye. Right now, we have 5 barrels that are being broken down to. You're wondering about the arrangement. I really leave that to staff, right? You gave me a document of like 25 pages and a presentation with the majority of that being about the ad hoc committee's goals, which you're not looking for feedback on. But then you gave me half of a page regarding these 5 buckets. I don't know how big these are, right? I don't know how big the document dump you're going to give me is. So it's hard for me to say this we can do all in one chunk when I don't know how big a piece of Title 18 that is, right? So I would need staff to come back to me and say, this is the amount that you're going to be looking at. Right now, this is how much we have. We expect this to shrink. We expect it to get bigger, right? So for me to be able to actually give you feedback on your 5 buckets, I need a lot more data. That being said, let's just assume that staff knows best, right? And to say, this is how we think it makes sense. Great, I totally trust staff to do that. But the concept that we would look at it on the same night as being able to give our recommendations to council is not something in my experience on this commission that would be possible. At a minimum, we're going to want 2 touches. So we're going to want to see a draft, we're going to want to talk about it, and then the second time we're going to want to see updates to that draft from our previous discussion before we can even be able to make a recommendation. That being said, one of the primary purposes of our commission is to be able to give the public the opportunity to see and to voice their comments, their concerns, their questions. So enabling the more touches we have on it really is the more chances that stakeholders in the community has to be able to touch this document. I have yet to see anything from my staff that doesn't get better the more people see it and the more touches and the more work we have. So I really encourage the maximum amount of touches. That being said, I am a huge fan of joint commissions. I think that the work that we do when we work together is some of the best stuff that we do. So every chance there is to have a joint commission, I recommend it. So I don't think that means that that needs to be a third necessarily touch on the topic. I think that that first one can be done. Looking at your 5 buckets, you'll have a recommendation, for instance, on natural environment. So we would have a pairing with environmental board, parks board, and let's say also DC. Having all those commissions in one Cisco WebEx meeting invite is, in my opinion, not how we're going to get our best work done. So I would recommend 2 commissions at most for a joint session. That breaks it down to me for 7, plus the 5 buckets for the meetings you want us to advise on it. That's a minimum of 12 meetings to be able to break down the 5 buckets that you have. From what I'm seeing, again, I would need more data to be able to say if we need more or less. I'm going to echo the comments that Commissioner Voice made and that our esteemed member of the community, Connie Marsh, made about education. I have a point here about how making decisions on context is really important. So aside from even diving into the new drafts of Title 18, we really need to have a pretty hardcore session about what we have, why it's not working, where we want to go, right? So if you want to call that an educational meeting, but that needs to be kind of its own bucket, in my opinion, from what we're seeing. So on page, I think it's 13 for the growth management, it talks about citizen participation. So I really want to encourage you when you guys are thinking about this, you kind of put to us when you want PPC to be able to see these things. I want to see how, when I see it, I want to see feedback from my community, right? I want to go into it not having, this is the first time everyone's ever seen this draft, right? So that means having more work sessions. And that means having more spaces for the public to be able to view and touch and give feedback before we're even seeing a draft plan. We love when we see things that say, hey, we met with these members of the community. There was 12 people, there was 24 people. These are what the options they cared about, right? We want to see those responses before we're even diving into the preliminary drafts, in my opinion. So I hope that that helps kind of clear up a little bit of our view on it. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis and Commissioner Milligan.
Thank you, Chair Fall. This is Commissioner Milligan, and thank you, Commissioner Lewis, for going before me, making my job easy. I was just going to ask a question about process, but Commissioner Fall, thank you for jumping in and reiterating the questions and directing our work. As the commissioners before me set the stage, I'm going to go through my laundry list, but maybe after we've heard as Commissioner Lewis mentioned, the other commissioners speak, maybe give us a chance to come back and see if there's a way that we can reflect upon what one another have said. My first thing to say is thank you to the public comment, the people who came tonight, and especially for the very thoughtful emails that we received this week. We've received a good handful of them, and they were all very helpful and informative. So thank you to everybody who did send in an email. I'm sure everybody read them. And then, and also thank you to Commissioner Lewis, +1 on everything, single thing you said, every single thing. But I'm going to go through my own list very briefly now, since you elaborated, just to be more clear about what I wanted to contribute. One was the schedule. And if you look at the last page in our packet, and we have our work schedule already for the year, and then I look at the things that we're going to do with the Title 18, I'm saying, wow, that looks like a lot of work. Now, where I agreed with what Commissioner Boyce said, I do, that's too much work. How are we going to do it all? I think that the Title 18 jumps up above a lot of priorities in my mind. This is a matter of great importance, and I think it's a matter of urgency, because development continues in Issaquah, and the longer we leave that Title 18 out there, and it's in the condition that it is now, that is causing issues and problems with staff and developers, the longer that it will be that way. So I'd like to get it done sooner rather than later. Also, to make a comment on taking action the same night, I agree with both the previous commissioners. I don't like trying to make a decision and action the night that I hear the first time from the public, for instance. Need a little more time to digest that and the new information. So I agree with the previous comments on that. And another more specific question was, do we want to see the draft? Well, yeah, we want to see the draft. Of course we do. And we need time after seeing the draft to work with it and to provide feedback. So the document, preliminary, what do you think about these things? Preliminary in sections, yes. But then once we get to the draft, we're going to need it in sections because it's a big document. The last thing that I want to say has to do with timing as well. And as we're looking at an update or an overhaul or all the different things we've said about what we're doing with Title 18, there could be significant changes in the code. Say we take some language in the code that says encourage this, that, or the other thing, and we change it to, man, that should be required in order to meet the objectives of the city. How do we tee this up? This is just an open question. How do we tee this up so that we don't have a flood of permit applications to try to get ahead of a new requirement that we want to put in the code? I don't know how we do that. Just want to throw that out there as an issue that I'd like to think about in advance. Oh, and the last thing is, the Director Dollywell, can we have a copy of your presentation from tonight? It just had a little bit more information and shown in a little different way. Would like to see that after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Milligan. And we have a question from Kristen. Matt Monahan. Commissioner Monahan, go ahead.
Thanks, Matt Monahan here. I'm going to join the chorus in agreeing with Joy. I like the concept of 2 touches at a minimum, and so I'm fine having the first kind of discussion education session in the joint meetings, because I think multiple perspectives are good. But my recommendation would be, when we're actually making our recommendation, we just keep it within this commission so that we can really dig into the meat, because I imagine some of these are going to be, very, very deep dives. And then something Joy also mentioned, I believe, was about education. I like being educated, but I think it can probably be done in the context of the changes that are being proposed. And so when we have that initial conversation in the joint meetings, I think we can really drill down into, okay, why was this change made? What are we trying to accomplish? Have a discussion about it. And then, as I believe Nina just said, have some time to digest on that, think about it, and then make specific recommendations to the language based on all of that. So that's all I had.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Commissioner Monahan. And so I also have a question, or actually more of a comment. So thank you very much, Commissioner Lewis and Commissioner Milligan and Commissioner Voice. You guys just basically took everything I want to say and said it well. And to also Matt Monahan's point as well, to answer the question for number 2, should PPC meetings on each of the groups be held jointly with other boards? And I absolutely agree. I believe the various boards are subject matter experts, the Development Commission, the Transportation Commission, the Parks Board, the Environmental Board. And to Matt's point, is it possible to have the appropriate boards do the deep dive analysis after maybe 2 heavy educational presentations in a joint session? And then that way we can discuss the topics and the findings from the other commissions so that we can leverage all of our information together instead of trying to master everything. I think it's too much of an ask for PPC, in my opinion. Okay, and that's my question. And then we have another question here from Commissioner Sarah Bader.
Yeah, thanks. Really just, I think a comment affirming everything I've heard so far. I think it's a little validating actually to hear this conversation because, again, being new to this commission, I looked at this and was like, did not know what to make of it. And so hearing you all who are far more experienced than me kind of have similar reactions to feeling the need for more processing time is validating. And so I would just kind of second, I think, everything that I've heard so far, and also just kind of make the point that I think if it's confusing to us, and I think Commissioner Lewis made this point that it's going to be confusing to members of the public. And so as we think about kind of meaningful engagement, I think the way this information is displayed and brought to this commission and the public more broadly is going to be really important to help us to get to those most appropriate decisions, for the best interest of the community as a whole. I also wanted to just kind of echo the call out for education. I appreciate Commissioner Monahan's point about kind of doing that within the context of the changes proposed and the points for discussion. But again, just hearing from the emails that we got from community members, I think the feedback tonight was also valuable. And so I want to make sure that we have time to just process. And so agree with the 2 touch points for all of this. I think time and spending kind of the intentional time on all of this is going to make it better off as a whole. So I think that those are kind of my points. I'm looking through my notes from before. I like the idea of doing kind of joint sessions. Again, I think that, not doing this work in silos is important and hearing from the expertise of other commissions. And again, I think it was a good suggestion to think about kind of the first touch being in that joint setting and then potentially doing kind of the deeper dive and deliberation within this group. I like that as a suggestion. And then I guess just a question. I heard the comments about climate. And so I wanted to see where within these 5 groups climate is included. And is that in the sustainability domain under natural environment, or where is climate represented in here, just as a question?
Yes. So this is Minnie Dhaliwal. Yes, that is captured in the sustainability goals and outcomes piece in the chart that the council has come up with. So it's also referenced. There are things that are going to come up with the climate action plan that the city is working on. So there'll be you all will be having a more deeper discussion on the climate action plan come June and fall. So that'll also be referenced in some of the more details.
Thank you very much, Minnie, and thank you very much, Commissioner Bader. Commissioner Zaragoza, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza here. So I just want to first agree with everything that everyone has said. I need to make no comments on that. I will, I guess, make louder Connie Marsh's comments on education. I do agree this is very, very deep stuff, and the more education, the better. That said, my question is, what are the ramifications of essentially more than doubling the amount of time that you've already planned for this? So you planned, I can't remember how many meetings it was, but we're talking about doubling that, or maybe even more than doubling those numbers of meetings. That's a very long time. That's going to set your schedule back much longer than a year and so many months. And what are the ramifications of that? And that's something we should be concerned about. Thanks.
And Commissioner Zaragoza, was that too, did you have a question to member of the staff, or that was just a general question?
I think that was a question for Katie Cole. Sorry.
Thanks. So I think if I'm not exactly sure when I'm hearing 2 touches. Right now, the schedule as it's laid out has each topic coming in this initial round for, I guess it's more of an educational and a gaps analysis discussion. And then again, when we're looking at the draft code. But I think what I'm hearing is that in addition to this earlier round, 2 additional touches when the draft is prepared is what the commission is asking for. So that would add, I think that would double the later meetings. The council has set the deadline for September 2022 to have the code update complete. And if there is a significant change to the schedule, we would need to have that approved by the council. I think that, the council is obviously committed to doing this right. And so I'm not suggesting that they wouldn't extend the timeline. But I'm not sure if that timeline is connected to anything else that the city's doing that we would need to coordinate. But the schedule that we showed you didn't have the later meetings shown in as much detail because we didn't yet know how many and what dates. And so as we know more, we can certainly fill out that schedule with more details. And then try to figure out how to fit those meetings into the PPC schedule. But I do think that adding 5 more meetings or 4 more meetings toward the end of the drafting phase would require us to push out the adoption timeline.
Thank you, Katie. So I guess a question for staff would be, can we ask council if we can extend it out, if it's reasonable? Because the commission's overall hearing, or the commission's overall saying we need more education before we can really be at a point where we can be making informed decisions. And I think we need to have other commissions involved. And so I'm looking at our schedule, and we have a couple TBDs, and I see some things that are definitely lower priority to Commissioner Milligan's point. I think we should move stuff around and address this key topic more urgently than some of the other things. And we need to ask the city's council whether or not they're willing to shift the deadline, and if it is something that's movable. Okay, we have two other questions here. Question or comment from Jason, Commissioner Voss. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Voice here. This is why I love this Zoom room. It's the best. So much good stuff just came out of the last 20 minutes, and I'm in agreement with, I think, everybody on this commission. I think Commissioner Monahan brought up a great point. I think the joint meetings could be a great place to get educated, and then also doing the deep dive by ourselves where we're able to talk with one another is a point well taken. I think we also need to, in those educational background settings with the other boards, is also kind of lean on them, that we have to be able to trust our other boards and commissions and not try to revisit their work. I know it's hard for all of us because we all want to put our fingerprints on everything we get because that's the amount of care that we have. But with something this big, we're going to have to also be trusting. To Commissioner Milligan's point, I think she hit it dead on. It is a priority, and we need to treat it like that. And I think Commissioner Fowle's correct. We should be able to move things around. Land use is one of the biggest, if not the biggest topic we touch here. And if that's the priority, and if this is a priority, we need to make it such. And we should ask council for more time if needed. We can do things like have the joint meetings and then have our PPC meeting following up to make decisions. But I do stand by, I don't see how anybody can make a decision after a joint meeting. There's just too much to digest. So a lot of wonderful conversation that I hear tonight. I'm in complete agreement with the rest of the commissioners. And yeah, I think we're going to need some time with this. And it is what it is, but we've got to get it right because there's so many people this is going to affect. Not only people that are interested in the wonderful environment that we have here, developers who we want to come in and do a proper job here. This is going to touch everybody in our city. So it's very, very important, at least here, that we do our job right. And if it means asking for more time, more education, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Voice. So to Katie and Minnie, I think people are really amped and excited about looking at this thing, ready to dive into it. We have one more question here from Commissioner Lewis, or comment.
Commissioner Joy Lewis here. I'm going to put on my granny glasses as the current longest serving member of this commission and tell you that we can do this lift. We had 1 year where we joked about the fact that we had just as many special meetings as we did scheduled meetings. So the idea that we need to push out the current ask and schedule, to me, I don't think we need to do that at all. I wouldn't even consider approaching council to move that June date unless it was, May of 2022. Okay, like I don't think we're there at all. What I think we need to do is rework our schedule in such a way that we say this is a big year, right? Frankly, it's been several years we've been asking for this from staff. The pandemic delayed our being able to really look at this the way that we were hoping to be able to. We're ready, right? So adding the additional meetings that we so badly are all requesting just means we have a more aggressive schedule. What we would normally do is we would come to staff and say, do you have the resources to be able to do what we're asking you to do? Luckily, it looks like council has approved a lot of money. I haven't seen transparency quite on how much, but the amount of consultants that we're bringing in for this means that I don't need to ask that question, right? Right now, staff seems like they're ready to go. And so I just want to say that we are too. I don't think we need to push our schedule. I think we're just going to end up finding that we're having a lot of special meetings. Maybe our fellow commissions have a little bit of room on their schedule and they would like to host us and invite us to see topics for some of our joint meetings, right? There's a lot of ways that you can work it out in the schedule. But I would most certainly not ask to move our June 22 timeframe. It's extremely important that we start diving into this as soon as staff is ready to give it to us. And I will say on a separate point, right now on page 16, we have a section on sustainability, but we really need a section on ensuring equity in our land use code. I can't recall what meeting it was. I don't remember if it was the meeting that we were on, that we had been invited to with the council, or whether it's a separate one that I was viewing. But the city administrator said that it was going to take about 2 years to educate just the city staff about equity. And I found that time frame to be pretty rough, right? I don't know that that's something that I'm going to agree with, but I will acknowledge that I heard that time frame. I think there's a need for staff to actually plan on an extra session that actually deals with community education along with how we're going to ensure equity in our land use code, which means calling out where it's been wrong before and helping to educate us to say, how did we make mistakes and how do we actually want to address it? So I think that's something that's important that is missing from this document and actually needs to be built into our schedule to be dealt with. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. I see everybody smiling when you just said all that. It's awesome. So I have a comment here from Senator Kristen.
So, this is Kristen Leeson, and I wanted to kind of reiterate what Joy said, in that yes, we've been asked to do a lot before, and we've managed to do it. And there are a lot of TBDs on the calendar, but we've left them blank on purpose, because even today, Minnie and Katie and I were working together to sort of rearrange some of the schedule to see what could fit in where, so that we could get some of that information out to you. So, even in June, we're combining the comprehensive plan topics, and we're leaving one of those open on the 24th instead for I should let Katie talk about it, but I think land use and education on policies and gaps and so forth there. So we will be filling the schedule. There will be lots of special meetings, and it looks like we haven't planned for that, but we are. We don't want to fill you up ahead of time so that we make sure we have room. That's all. Thank you.
The only thing I would add to that, Kristen, this is Minnie Dhaliwal. This is a legislative process, so we can meet with you one-on-one with at least a couple of you at one time if you really want to take a deeper dive, and some topic is of your passion and you really want to get to spend time at your convenience, at a time that works for you. We'll make sure we're staff is available to give you the understanding or feeling comfortable making some of those decisions for city council. So that's one thing I want to say. It's not just, you're not limited to that meeting at that time. So for the educational piece, or if you want to discuss any other topic, please, we're happy to meet with you separately in a group of, obviously not violating the Open Public Meetings Act that you all got trained on last month, but there's no prohibition on legislative stuff to talk amongst yourselves and or with staff outside of that one meeting that the topic comes in front of you. I think the next order for staff is we'll go back with the feedback that we have from you tonight. We've heard from the community, and come up with a revised schedule that at least attempts to fold in some of the things we heard tonight. For the educational piece, again, one of the attempts we were trying to do tonight was to lay that framework. So we understand, here's some of the framework that you need to keep in mind. So that was one idea, but I think what I'm hearing is the educational piece needs to be vetted out a little bit. So if you have strong opinions on what we should be covering, is it more broader concepts, or is it really by topic? I think what I heard was education. If we show you, say we're talking about parking, just picking parking for no reason, but we talk about what the parking standards are, what the goals are, and then we get a deeper dive into it. So I think an educational piece by topic may get you guys into the details that we need to get to Title 18 code language. But if you want to set up one meeting just to talk about the policies a little bit more and discuss the gaps, as some of the community members were talking about, we can do that in the June meeting if that's desired. And that won't be getting into the topics of the code, but we can take a little bit deeper dive into the strategic plan, the comprehensive plan policies, if you think that'll be useful from an educational piece.
Thank you very much, Minnie. And I have set. I don't see any more comments. Kristen, do you have any comments on your screen?
I do not.
Okay. Last call for comments or questions. Excellent. I got a question from Commissioner Voice.
Thank you, Chair Fowl. So I guess real quickly, I'm just interested to hear, Director Dhaliwal just kind of laid it out for us. So I'm interested to hear what the fellow commissioners would like to hear or see, how to get this educational stuff. Do we want to take it issue by issue, or would we prefer one large meeting where we kind of hear a bit of overview and a bit of where we're going and where we want to go, and then we follow it up with some tutoring lessons? I guess that's what I'm kind of interested in. Who wants to do what? I like taking them in sections, but I know that just keeps pushing us out. So again, I know it's a little bit compressed for time, so maybe it's just one meeting where we just focus on exactly what the goals are, what the gaps are, and where we want to go. You know, we can have a all-nighter. Somebody can bring the pizza.
Virtual pizza. So, question for Jason is, if we have a meeting, a general education meeting, then we could say after the meeting, break up into groups of 3 and then meet offline with Katie or Minnie or the other appropriate staff and become subject matter experts, sort of, in those specific topics so that we break off into our own passions and then we can bring it back to PPC. I think Lucy has a question. She's kind of raising her hand. Nope. Okay, she's just nodding. And we have a comment from Commissioner Milligan. Oh, so hang on. Sorry. I got a comment for a question from Commissioner Lewis first.
Thank you, Chair. This is Commissioner Joy Lewis. And I wanted to piggyback on Jason wanting to actually answer Minnie's question, which is, you know, what we're here to do. So I appreciate you starting that. And that is to say that I think we can do both, right? Matt said, you know, I think we can have an educational piece that's a part of each section when we break it up, right? So I had emailed Kristen earlier about kind of how a preference that I would like to see when we get our packets, right? When we start to get background, we start to get things. I love when our packet has a really big meaty section prior to even looking at the draft, right? I want background, I want links. Hey, you know, I love when staff does my dirty work and it's like, check out this council session. And if you want to buzz forward, this is the time that you're going to want, right? You know, so I think we can do both, right? I think that we can, to Matt's point, I think that we can have each section as we look at the draft, be able to go into that deep dive, like Minnie was saying about what are the current parking requirements, where are we trying to go from where we've been as part of that meeting. But I think that we can also have a separate meeting where we do talk about the comp plan, the strategic plan, to say, what does this mean, right? And to say, where is it that we can go, right? And enabling us to be able to say, where are we empowered to use these broad policy documents to really bake it into our code, right? So I think that we can to Minnie's question, I think we can have both. As far as that goes. So I don't think it has to be an either or, and I don't think we need to start using up time to have just a history lesson in one. And I think that staff is generously providing their time to us. And so while I do love that idea, I think that it needs to be a component of where we're going. Connie had a really interesting point about giving a project example, right? So if we did one meeting that was all about going through the comp plan, the strategic plan, and saying, what are our policies? Where are the gaps? What are we missing? How can we translate this into our code? And being able to actually have an example of a project moving through. Where have we had hiccups? What are we trying to solve, right? I think that's an interesting idea, giving real world experiences while we're approaching the policy choice. So that's just kind of my take on it. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Commissioner Lewis. And comment from Commissioner Milligan.
Thank you, Chair Fall, and thank you, Commissioner Boyce, for the question. I think that you're also rephrasing the question, are the 5 major groupings and subgroupings appropriate for our review? I think that's part of what we're asking here. And I just want to say that those groupings, as I see them listed on page 23 of the packet, made sense to me. And I think that those are groupings that are doable, just with the caveat that these things are groupings, not silos, which make it kind of difficult to pull them apart and deal with them that way. So I just want to keep in mind context, and any help staff can provide to help keeping them in context would be very helpful. Thank you.
Ron, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking to myself again. I don't see any more comments or questions from any commissioners yet. So I'll just give it a couple seconds here in case anyone decides to ask a question. Right, I do not. So with this said, I think move to the next phase of our meeting tonight. And that is for reports. Is that correct, Kristen?
That is correct. And this is Kristen Leeson, Senior Planner, and I will start this, but I am going to have either Lucy or Minnie finish this. But at the last council study session, the sign code was taken, and the council has actually remanded the sign code back and would like some revisions to it as a part of the Title 18 update. And I think Lucy or Minnie could be a little clearer on that.
So they remanded it not to you, but to the council ad hoc committee that's working on Title 18. They are looking at further reformatting and reorganization to streamline it. So for instance, taking definitions and where you have a section of code on projection signs, integrating the definition into that section, making that section a chart, and being less text oriented and more visually oriented, maybe incorporating more graphics. There is also a desire to, I'm going to use the word explore because I'm not sure that there is consensus on exactly what this means, but to be less prescriptive. I think the council found that there were things that we have historically regulated that may not be necessary to regulate, and that would allow us to focus better on the things that we are regulating. And to the point that some of you commissioners made this evening, I think maybe it was Commissioner Milligan, why are we regulating this? So to ask ourselves that what are we trying to do? What do we want to accomplish? And I think that will help them decide whether some of the things that we've proposed achieve that or not, or if those are the right goals. And I think lastly, what I would say before I hope Director Dhaliwal chimes in with her perspective is that I completely forgot what I was going to say. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Lucy. And
oh, I'm sorry. Now I remember. I think the last piece is this will be really interesting to see what we learn that then carries forward to Title 18. I think we all started with this gap analysis and bringing all the pieces of the code together and fixing the legal problems and opportunities. But clearly the commission and the council have some additional goals. And I think that the sign code has helped us identify what some of those mean. Some of those are captured in the goals and outcomes chart. For instance, in that sort of number 13 or 14, the very last one that talks about, modernizing and streamlining it. One person's modernization is so 20th century to someone else. And so seeing this in real life, it has, for me, been very informative to understand what that might look like. Thank you.
thank you very much, Lucy. Kristen, any more additional comments or questions about reports?
I have no other reports.
Excellent. Okay, so we are going to go back to public comments and open general public comments at 8:11. Kristen, do we have anybody who wants to speak?
Don't see any hands raised.
Mike Bailey would like to speak, please.
Pardon?
Mike Bailey?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm Mike Bailey. I'm a resident of Issaquah and also do some development. I kind of missed the whole deal on this meeting, but since I listened to the whole thing, I'd like to just get my 2 bits on a specific portion of the code, which is the Old Town parking provisions. There was about a year and a half ago, there was talk about maybe adding if you're going to do a change of use, that it would not provide it wouldn't change the parking requirement for an existing use if you had a change of use in the Old Town. And right now, that's only working on if you're along East Sunset Way, but they were thinking about making that a blanket for the whole Old Town area. Is that going to be coming up, or is it still going to be kicking down the road, or any thoughts about that? That's
Mr. Paul, this is not a back and forth, but if you'd like me to address that, I could.
Kristen, if you feel comfortable in addressing it, the floor is yours.
Yes, so the code was amended in 2018, no, you're right, it was last year. It was approved last year in 2020 to expand the area where expansions of existing businesses and additions of buildings did not require additional parking if it was within a certain amount. There's a map in our land use code that shows where that area is. That was expanded. However, there was no discussion about expanding that beyond where it currently exists. So that will not be coming forward again.
Okay. But at one time it was going to be a blanket over the whole Old Town, wasn't it?
No.
No? Oh.
No.
Okay. That was my understanding from before. So the only areas in Old Town are just along Sunset Way, and that's it, on East Sunset Way.
No, it's on Sunset Way and Front Street, and then it goes east and west a little bit of Front Street. There's a map in our code. And if you'd like to email me, I can send you the link to that place in the code.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll send that up to you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. It was enjoyable listening to all you guys out there.
Thank you for your comment. And Kristen, do we have any additional public comments?
Yes, we do. I'm going to start with Ann Fletcher. All right. Ann, you are a panelist. Go ahead and speak. You are muted. Can you, I'll unmute you. Okay, there you go.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for unmuting me. I just wanted to thank you all. And in particularly, I just wanted to let you know I'm very heartened by the discussion here, and that I agree that we don't need to take longer on this, but I think the ideas that you came up with to be creative on how we can get input during this year, and the idea of surveys and focus groups in addition to the meetings, the ideas of having the joint meetings, and the ideas of breaking into smaller groups, and the staff invitation to have people that want to do a deeper dive be able to do that. There's so many great ideas here, and I just really want to thank you. I feel very heartened about this process, and the climate group is ready to delve in this and work hard with you to learn and to do our best for our community. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fletcher, and we will probably see lots of you. And
so I see that Connie Marsh still has her hand raised, and let me see. Connie, would you like to speak?
Yes, I sent you a message too saying I wanted to speak because I kept raising and lowering my hand.
I see that now. All right, I'll make you a presenter. 1 second. Or a panelist. Okay, you're a panelist.
Okay, so I'll videoize myself. There you go. So this is Connie Marsh again, and I agree with Ann. I think you guys are had a great conversation. Now, this is for you and for staff too. The other commissions, with the exception of Development Commission, who is somewhat more familiar with code, but they actually just get staff presentations. And so they have a certain assumption that staff is providing the appropriate code. They actually have a few ideas of where the issues are. But for example, the Environmental Board, the Transportation Board, the Economic Vitality Commission, they know just as little about the code as you all do, and not that much more about policy. So they are going to need an equal amount of education if you want them to be the subject matter experts, because you keep saying you're going to lean upon them. And well, they are stronger in the opinions that they have formed on certain topics. That does not give them the education to guide code creation without some work. So I'm wondering if there is not videos that can be made or something where people can go and have learning modules on topics at their own time, so staff isn't always having to present the exact same information over and over, and then you could have question and answers back and forth that could become frequently asked questions from the presentations, because it just sounds like a heck of a lot of work for staff that could be education in a can. So I just wanted to, my efficiency brain started sort of swirling around in all of that. And I don't know if that's a helpful idea or not, but thank you for all your effort, and staff. I know you're going to work like crazy, and I'm going to work you as hard as I possibly can to get a great code. So, thank you all.
Thanks, Connie. Is great. And Kristen, do we have any additional comments from the public?
I don't see any other hands raised, but I will put it out there one more time. If anybody would like to speak, please raise your hand or send me a note. I'll try and see it this time. One more call. No, there are no more comments or questions.
All right, thanks, Kristen. So we're going to go ahead and close public comment at 8:20. And now we're going to move on to other business and announcements, specifically the upcoming schedule, which we were talking about earlier. Kristen?
Hi, this is Kristen Leeson, and you're right. We did talk about it earlier. Today, we decided to take the community facilities redesignation and rezone requests and merge those with the Old Town implementation. So we're going to do that on June 10th. And then on June 24th, we are going to talk about an education on land use and look a little bit more closely at that. And then we will start filling in the TBDs with lots of Title 18 updates for you. I will try and combine the comprehensive plan amendments this year, aside from the climate change policies, are not super intensive. So I will see what I can do to combine some of those a little bit more.
Excellent.
That's all I have.
All right. With that, we are going to adjourn the meeting at 8:20.